welcome to Sleepy Tales, a place where myths and legends are told slowly and softly to help you gently fall asleep. Before we begin, I'd love for you to share where you're from and what time it is where you are. It's always fascinating to see how far these stories travel. And if you enjoy relaxing stories, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a night of our peaceful tales. Now settle in, relax, and drift off to tonight's bedtime story. The python lay dead beneath the golden sun, steam rising from its monstrous coils, like breath surrendering to the ether. The world had scarcely recovered from the echo of its last hiss before Apollo stood tall upon the blood-warmed stone, laurels not yet his, but pride already blooming like a crown. He was radiant, not merely with the brilliance of his celestial birth, but with the smug gleam of one who knew himself to be destined, divine, and victorious. He held the bow that had brought death to the Chaos Serpent, its strings still vibrating faintly with the memory of divine aim. The world watched, the reeds leaned in, even the river paused to listen as Apollo declared his triumph. "Let none compare," he said, lifting the bow toward the sky. "This is the weapon of gods. What business does a child like Eros have with it? Let him play with his toys. Love is not war." It was a casual cruelty, tossed into the air like a discarded sunbeam. But words, like arrows, are never truly lost. They land somewhere, and Eros was listening. He was no child, not truly. His wings might have shimmered with youth, but his eyes were older than longing itself. Love, after all, does not age. It merely evolves its disguises. And what Apollo failed to understand was that Eros's bow was older than his own pride, and infinitely more dangerous. 2 arrows, that was all it took. One of gold, light as laughter, sharp as flame. The other lead, dull, cold, and heavy with finality. Both drawn in silence, both loosed with divine accuracy. The golden arrow struck Apollo in the heart, and it sang. It sang of perfection, of beauty glimpsed through leaves, of footsteps in a grove, of a name not yet spoken but already sacred. It was the beginning of something irreversible. Love, in its rawest, cruelest form, uninvited, unrelenting. And somewhere, not far off, Daphne stumbled slightly, her breath catching as the lead arrow brushed her soul. It did not pierce like the golden one. It settled like a stone in her chest, a dull weight, a number she could not name it, but she felt it, a sudden, unbearable aversion, not just to love, but to being seen, touched, desired. Daphne had long belonged to the forests. She was a creature of wind and bark, a daughter of the river god Peneus, but more faithful to the wild than to blood. She had already vowed herself to Artemis, untouched and untouchable, her limbs made for running, not reclining. Her breath, when steady, smelled of pine. Her hair fell like moss over her shoulders, and when she laughed, rarely, it was like water leaping from stone. But now something had shifted. The air changed. It thickened with gold. Apollo saw her, not merely as a nymph or a mortal, but as the answer. The golden arrow had done its work well. She wasn't the first beautiful thing he had laid eyes on, but this was not sight. This was need. He moved closer, not as a god descending, but as a moth too near the flame of its own making. His words, honeyed and soft, drifted across the clearing. "Do not run," he said, though she had not moved yet. Your beauty was meant to be worshipped. Daphne turned away. Her hands trembled at her sides, not from fear, but from something deeper, the instinct of prey. The forest beckoned. The river whispered her name. Apollo watched her go, her feet already moving, steps barely touching the ground. He did not follow yet. He watched, entranced. Each step she took was a note in the symphony of his desire. Her refusal was a challenge the arrow would not allow him to ignore. He smiled. He would write poems, sing songs, prove himself. Had he not just slain a creature of chaos? What was one reluctant nymph compared to that? The golden arrow pulsed within him, a second heart. Daphne ran, though there was no chase yet. Her breath tangled with the wind, her heartbeat syncing with the rhythm of trees. She did not understand why she fled, only that she must. That to be near that voice, that radiance, was to risk being burned from the inside out. She whispered into the leaves, half prayer, half warning. Let him not find me. Above them, the sky began to dim, not with clouds, but with destiny. Apollo, still standing where he had first seen her, touched the string of his bow, but not to draw it. It made no music now, no glory in this hunt, only a rising tide of need. He began to follow, before the arrows, before the gaze, before the forest held its breath. There was only Daphne and the quiet rhythm of her life, a life of motion, of silence, of cool shadows and tangled roots beneath her feet. She moved through the woods like a rumor. She did not startle birds when she passed. They simply lifted and resettled as if she were wind. The deer looked up from their grazing and blinked, unafraid. She had no interest in Olympus. Its thrones and riddles, its politics of immortality were distant clouds to her. Even the nymphs who flirted with travelers or sang by the river thought her strange. She did not laugh easily. She did not soften for admiration. She refused with kindness but finality. Her joy was not romantic. It was elemental. She found ecstasy in the rise of a hill, the sudden burst of olives on her tongue, the plunge into a cold stream in the hush of dawn. And always she ran. It was not for fear. It was for the feeling, the crisp snap of air in her lungs, the stretch of muscle over bone, the untouchable joy of speed. Even time seemed unable to catch her when she ran. Her father, the river god Peneus, watched her with ancient patience. He had offered her the usual comforts, a temple, attendants, a noble husband, perhaps a minor constellation if she married well. But Daphne asked for none of these. She knelt before him only once in supplication. I do not want a man, she said. Not now, not ever. Let me live as I am, unclaimed. Peneus had known mortal whims before, daughters who swore to Artemis only to fall at the first sigh of love. But Daphne's vow felt different, not heated or impulsive, but bone deep. The water stirred in agreement. He touched her hair and gave his blessing. And so she belonged to no one. But the world does not always leave such vows untouched. After the arrows flew, one golden, one lead, something shifted in the stillness. It was subtle at first, a shadow that lingered longer than it should, a warmth behind her shoulder that didn't belong to the sun. The birds quieted when she passed, but not for reverence. She was being watched. Daphne had felt desire before, from satyrs with wandering eyes, from mortals hoping to boast of a kiss from a river's daughter. She had turned them all away. Some had cursed her, some had cried. She did not care. She was not made for their games. But this was different. She had not yet seen Apollo, not truly, only glimpses, the flash of gold through the trees, the ripple of song in the air too perfect to be natural. He did not approach, not yet, but he was always near. She began to run more often, not for pleasure now, but for peace. Her feet carried her farther from the familiar places. She ran beyond her groves, past the olive trees, deeper into the woods where even the dryads whispered warnings. At night, she pressed her back to the bark of ancient trees and felt their silence wrap around her like armor. "Let him forget me," she whispered. "Let him grow tired." But gods do not grow tired. Apollo, radiant, obsessed, transformed by Eros's golden strike, had become a creature of pursuit. He saw her everywhere, in the curve of rivers, in the sway of branches, in the hush of wind. His lyre strummed only her name now. His footsteps led only toward her. Each day he moved closer, not with speed, but inevitability. He told himself he would not frighten her. He would not be like the others. He would prove his love. But love born of arrows is not gentle. He left no footprints, but she felt him. His longing wrapped itself around her like heat, not burning yet, but close. She ran again. Her limbs were strong, but even strength has limits. Daphne climbed high into the hills, into the places where mortals rarely came. The trees grew thinner here, and the stars touched the earth with clearer voices. She sat beneath a stone arch once built by hands, long turned to dust, and watched the moon rise. She had no mirror, but she could feel the change in herself. Her heart beat faster now, even when still. Her breath shortened, even in rest. It was not love. It was being hunted. She closed her eyes and listened to the rustle of leaves. The world, too, was unsettled. The trees bent slightly uneasily. The earth did not know whom to favor. She pressed her hand to the ground. "Father," she whispered, "if I must lose everything to remain untouched, then let me lose it." The wind carried no reply. Far below, Apollo wandered the paths she had taken hours before. He knelt in the places she had knelt. He breathed where she had breathed. Each time he missed her by heartbeats, and it made his yearning grow sharper. He whispered to the trees. "You were meant for light," he said. "You were meant for me." But Daphne, high on the ridge, wrapped her arms around her knees and leaned into the cold stone. She felt not desire, but the crushing weight of being wanted. It was not flattering. It was a trap. She knew what happened to girls who were chased too long. Myths called them lovers. Graves called them something else. She would not wait to be turned into a cautionary tale. In the morning, she would run again. At first, the chase was quiet. Not because it lacked urgency, but because the forest held its breath. The trees knew what was coming. They had seen it before, the sudden shift in wind, the unnatural stillness before a predator moves. But even predators, even storms obey a rhythm. Apollo did not. He moved with the certainty of one who believed the world was designed to clear a path before him. Daphne was already running. Her legs, honed from years of freedom, carried her easily. Her feet skimmed the surface of the forest floor, barely disturbing the moss beneath them. She did not glance back, not yet, because she already knew what followed. Not the crunch of underbrush, not the pounding feet of a beast, just presence, radiant, weightless, suffocating. Apollo. He no longer bothered with stealth. There was no need. His pursuit was not built on surprise, but inevitability. His golden form moved through the trees without resistance, not gliding, not flying, but as if the world rearranged itself to ease his passing. Branches bent, shadows fled, time itself slowed in reverence. He did not run as mortals do. He moved as light moves, inevitable and tireless. Daphne's heart beat harder with each step, not just from the exertion, but from the knowledge that this chase had no end unless she made one. Her breath came in bursts now, each one tasting of sap and urgency. She leapt over roots, ducked beneath vines, twisted through the narrowest paths, but the sensation never left her, that warmth at her back, growing closer, more insistent, more certain. She was not being wooed. She was being claimed. And yet Apollo's face did not wear hunger or anger. It wore hope. That was the cruelest part. He did not see himself as a pursuer. He saw himself as a lover, running toward the future he believed fate had promised him. The arrow in his chest pulsed with golden light, turning longing into prophecy. He called out to her once, "Do not fear me." It was almost tender, almost, but Daphne did not answer. The wind stole the words before they could reach her, or perhaps she simply refused to hear them. She had no words left, only breath, only speed. She passed a startled herd of deer that scattered around her. Birds rose from their nests in trembling flocks. The world moved in rhythms she had once cherished, the shuffle of leaves, the whisper of rivers, the sigh of the sky. Now it was drowned beneath the thrum of pursuit. Apollo was closing in. He had not touched her, not even once, but she could feel the curve of his hand already reaching in the space between them. He marveled at her speed, even admired it. But admiration is not mercy. The trees began to change. The deep forest opened into sunlit glades, places where shadows were short and the cover thin. Daphne cursed the light. It exposed her. Her limbs, though tireless before, now ached. Her breath was growing ragged. She had run for hours or perhaps only moments. Time had melted into instinct. Still, she did not stop. The river was ahead. She could hear it, the low, eternal murmur of her father's waters, the promise of refuge wrapped in sound. Her body burned, not with love, but with the memory of her vow. Her father had once promised to protect her. Now she would call in that promise, even if it cost her everything. Behind her, Apollo gained ground, not because he meant harm, but because he could not conceive of letting go. He saw her not as a woman running, but as fate retreating from him, and he believed fate could be persuaded. His voice reached her again, closer now. "Let me love you." A simple plea, a soft one, but it was not soft to her. Daphne burst through the last fringe of trees. The river opened before her, wide, ancient, glistening beneath the sun. The air shimmered with heat and divinity. Her knees faltered, her lungs rebelled, but she did not stop. She staggered to the edge of the water. Her reflection showed a face wild with exhaustion, streaked with leaves and sweat and fear. Her eyes met her own, and even they did not recognize her anymore. She turned them skyward. The words came like blood from a wound, torn, desperate, final. Father, help me. Let the earth take me. Let me be free of this. The river surged. Apollo stepped from the trees just as she collapsed to her knees. His arms extended, not in threat but in triumph, as though he were catching something beautiful before it could fall. But she was already falling. Her feet rooted into the earth before he could reach her. Her skin hardened into bark. Her hair stretched upward into leaves. Her breath, once rapid, became the slow exhale of wind through branches. He stopped, inches away. The golden arrow still blazed in his heart, but now it burned without direction. His hand hovered over the rough bark where her shoulder had been. The heat of her still lingered. A heartbeat ago, she had moved like a storm. Now she was stillness. Daphne was a tree. The moment held its breath. Apollo stood in the sunlight, his arms still outstretched, his fingers hovering above the place where warm skin had been only heartbeats ago. What met him instead was bark, smooth, pale, newly formed, but bark nonetheless. Daphne's form, frozen in motion, had rooted into the earth. Her legs were no longer legs. Her feet had already vanished beneath the soil, twisting downward. Her back arched into the beginning of a trunk. Her hair, once loose and alive with wind, was now a canopy of trembling green leaves. He lowered his hand. There was no gesture grand enough to reverse what had happened. There was no poetry for a moment like this, not even his. The sun god, radiant and eternal, stood dumbstruck before a being who had chosen stillness over him. The forest creaked. A single leaf fell. He took a step closer, and the air thickened with silence. Even the birds seemed to understand this was no ordinary end, no death, no victory, it's just a shift, a line drawn not in sand, but in bark and will. Daphne had not fled in vain. She had reached her father's river. She had been heard. The prayer had been accepted, and she had been changed. Her arms, now long branches, stretched toward the sky as if they too longed for something more. Her breath no longer filled lungs, but moved in the soft rustle of wind weaving through her leaves. She had lost her voice and gained 1,000. Apollo circled the tree slowly, reverently. His heart, still pierced by Eros's golden arrow, beat a rhythm too large for his chest. Not rage, not even grief. Something harder to name, the ache of something desired too fiercely and held too late. "You are still beautiful," he whispered. The words were not meant to be heard. They were confessions that spilled like water over roots. He touched the trunk gently. It was warm. He pressed his cheek to the bark. It did not move. Of course it didn't. But the wind answered in leaves. He had not meant for this. Not truly. He had pursued, yes. He had burned, yes. But he had wanted to be chosen. Not to force her to run, not to see her vanish into a still, leafy silence. And yet, in the hunger to be loved, even gods forget how terrifying they are. She had escaped him not through violence, but through transformation. Her choice, irreversible and exact. Daphne had torn herself from the world of movement and breath to become something the god of light could not follow, rooted, unmoving, untouched. Apollo stepped back. He looked at the tree, not as a lover denied, but as a worshiper in awe. He could not undo what she had become, but he could mark it. he could make it known to all that this was not just any tree. This was Daphne. "I will make you eternal," he said gently. "You will wear no wreath of roses or ivy. You will wear yourself." He reached up and plucked a single branch, carefully, softly. The tree did not shiver, but the air did. He twisted the branch into a circle, crude at first, then elegant in its simplicity, a crown of leaves. "I will wear this in every battle," he promised. "Every song, every triumph. Poets will bow to you, victors will wear you. You will never be forgotten." There was no reply, and yet there was. The wind moved. The leaves stirred with a hush, like a breath released. The world was quieter than before, but not empty. He placed the laurel crown upon his golden head, not in victory, but in mourning, not in ownership, but in reverence. She had run from him. She had chosen herself. She had asked to be saved, and the earth had answered. Not with a sword, not with a storm, but with stillness. He would not chase again. Seasons passed, but the tree did not change. It grew, of course, slowly, elegantly, but its essence remained the same. Daphne, rooted in silence, stood at the edge of the river like a statue of wind and memory. The world moved around her. Storms came and went. Birds nested in her branches and sang songs she would never hear. The earth shifted, time softened, but she stood untouched. Apollo returned often, not with fire in his step, not with pursuit in his veins, but with a quieter kind of longing. He brought music sometimes, letting the sound of his lyre drift through the grove. It was never loud. It was not meant to summon, just to speak gently into the spaces where words had failed. He wore the laurel always. In battle, it shimmered with light. In poetry, it glowed with meaning. It crowned the brows of artists, your athletes, leaders, each one a quiet tribute to the nymph who had become more than flesh, more than myth. She had become a symbol, not of surrender, but of self. She had not loved him. She had not needed to. Her refusal, her transformation, had carved a deeper story into the world, one that did not end in union or embrace, but in boundary, in freedom. And Apollo, in time, came to understand. He loved her still, perhaps, or perhaps he loved the ache she left behind, a reminder that not all beauty must be possessed, not all light is meant to be caught. Some things are meant only to be witnessed, to be honored, to be left untouched. When the wind rustled the leaves, he listened. When the sun passed through her branches, he paused. She was no longer running. She no longer needed to. She had become the finish line, and the god who once chased her now stood still,